Hello there, welcome back to my channel. I'm in. Stephen King has a short story called A Good Marriage. The plot is quite simple. A happily married housewife with 2 adult children and a husband who has been in love for decades. But here's the kicker. One day while she was cleaning out this attic, she finds out her husband's actually been a notorious serial killer this whole time. If you were her, what would you do? And could you imagine how messed up she must feel when she remembers all these nights she spent in bed with a crazy psycho killer? And yeah, I know not all serial killers are violent with their partners and have regular jobs. Even though the movie with the same title received low ratings on Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb, some people might think the story is too wild to be true, but it actually happened. Anyway, spoiler alert for our story today. In China, there was this lady who reported a crime without realizing her husband was the one who did it. So, on the 30th of May 1999, things were heating up in Beijing. The temperature hit around 30 Celsius degree during the day, but at night it dropped below 20 degrees. So most people would open their balcony windows at night to let in the cool evening breeze. It would be a perfect night for a peaceful and restful sleep. However, having the windows open at night can be nice for the breeze and all, but it might also be an invitation for trouble. At about 3 a.m., a man wearing socks and gloves climbed onto the second-floor balcony of an apartment. The balcony belonged to a 2-bedroom apartment that was rented by a company for its female employees. There lived 8 young women, aged 17 to 24. 7 of them were sales ladies for a jewelry counter in Beijing, and the 8th was on a business trip there. They had planned to go visit Great Wall the next day. The girls, in the midst of their dreams, had placed great trust in the world. As they were living on the second floor with no barred windows and unlocked doors, they must have felt safe and well cared for, like most of we are nowadays. However, in the past, in China, many of those old houses have windows that are actually sealed, much like the video I took here, especially in lower floor residential buildings. Without exception, they will install thick, sturdy nuts over their windows. This serves to prevent laundry from falling off the balconies and also deters intruders from entering through the balconies. So this creepy guy landed to the balcony and took no effort to break through a thin mosquito net door and came into the dormitory. This dude had a pretty obvious goal. He was on the hunt for something. And then in the middle of the night, there was this soft rustling sound that echoed around. And wouldn't you know it, some of the ladies sleeping nearby woke up because of it. The dude's reaction was like a mouse almost got caught by a cat. Well, almost, so he was a bit overreacted. When he saw one of the girls about to leave the room, he ran over and covered her mouth to shut her up. But before he could even say anything, the girl he grabbed started to wiggle and yell. Other girls in the room started to wake up too. One of them even switched on the light. When the bright light flooded in, the dude felt like his world was about to crumble. There were just so many people, all staring at him. He was super panicked at first, but on a second thought, they were just girls. Perhaps in the eyes of someone like him, he saw women as vulnerable and at the same time had no mercy for vulnerables. So he started to attack them. It was not a big room. Once the guy stood by the door, no one could come across him to seek help from the other bedroom. The guy stabbed the girls in the lower bunks first, and when he saw so much blood pouring out, he would climb up to finish the other 2 girls on top. As I mentioned, this is a 2-bedroom flat. with 4 girls in each bedroom. So like when the bedroom next door was getting attacked and making all these noises, it was bound to get the attention from the girls in the room next to it, right? And then those girls rushed out and came over to check out what was going on. Therefore, they got grabbed and stabbed by the devil as well. One of them managed to crawl out and ask for help from the neighbors, though. Before any neighbors could respond to the knocking, she saw that devil was catching up on her. So she couldn't wait for the neighbor to respond. She stumbled her way towards the staircase. But she got caught up eventually and was stabbed to death there on the staircase. And she was one step away to leave the building. The guy was covered in blood, and when he returned to the bedrooms, he actually saw one of those girls he thought that was dialing on a phone or something. Before he knew it, he stabbed right from her back and twisted his knife to make sure the girl was completely died this time. In fact, after he cooled down a bit, he stabbed each of them multiple times again, just in case they would somehow revive. The guy never thought there would be so much blood could come out of those bodies. He almost slipped on the puddles of the floor several times while giving the extra stabs. In desperation, he searched inside the flat and put on a pair of women's slippers that he could barely fit into to prevent slipping. And it took him only 20 minutes to finish off 8 girls. Now he can finally calm down and began to search for money and valuables in the rooms. But he couldn't find much, only some changes in some handbags. He left the flat with several dozen Chinese yuan. Since his attack lasted for a while, not all the neighbors were deaf. They definitely heard some cries and weird structures came out from that flat, so they noticed the residential management office. Now let's have a brief history reminder. Before the year of 2000, most of these residential units were actually managed by specific agencies or organizations. And in the past, if you would want to make an external phone call, each household needed to dial a special prefix number, and making external calls was not cheap. However, it's important to note that these internal phone calls within residential complex were free of charge. However, on the other hand, to make internal phone calls within this residential complex were free of charge. So whenever something happened in people's homes, they would first call the management office with the internal calls, which was similar to today's, property management or security services. These neighbors who heard strange noises because they didn't dare to stick their heads out in the middle of the night and also didn't have the mindset to call the police directly, their first instinct was to contact the residential management office and have the administrators go and investigate what was happening. And the woman on duty in this management office that night picked up so many of these calls, right? She was very confused and worried. So she firstly called her physically stronger colleagues to come over to the office, and before anyone could arrive, she decided to go check it out first. As she and her families also lived in the very building where got reported with strange sounds or noises. So she was like rushing to that building in the night rain, and she totally didn't see the whole way because there was this little van parked right outside the stairs and all. Then when she went around the vehicle and was about to go into the stairwells, she finally saw there was a girl, shoeless, lying on the ground. Wow, she didn't look good. It was just too much blood coming out of her. So the administrator rushed right back to her office and called the police. Upon arrival at the scene, the police immediately conducted a preliminary investigation and discovered a total of 8 victims. 1 person was found dead outside the building, while 7 were found dead inside the flat. The 7 victims inside 2 were found dead on bunk beds, and 1 was found next to the landline. The other 5 victims were on the floor. All the victims had multiple knife wounds. There were a bunch of bloodstains all over the place, and you could totally see where someone had walked through it, because there were footprints leading from the outside of the building to the apartment door. The ones outside were kind of hard to make out, but the ones going up the stairs to the second floor were a lot clearer. Several handbags at the scene showed signs of being searched, with bloodstains and bloody handprints present on them. Additionally, blood handprints and splattered patterns were discovered outside the neighboring apartment as well. And on the staircase in between the ground and second floor, they found a pair of women's slippers. So based on what we can see from the crime scene, it's pretty tough to say exactly why this murder happened. It looks like someone was searching for valuables, but the way the killing went down seems like it was super brutal and not just your typical let's shut them up kind of thing. As each victim had a ton of knife wounds, almost like someone was really out to get them. So like a bunch of cops and CSI types got sent over to help with this huge case. They did a ton of forensic testing and talked to a bunch of people in the area, and here's what they found out. 1. It looks like there was only one person who did this based on the footprints left behind. They were thinking it's probably a guy who was about 170 centimeters tall and under 40 years old. 2. All the victims suffered injuries from the same weapon with over 100 knife wounds. Even the victim with the fewest wounds had at least 8, while some had more than 20 knife wounds. Each wound was inflicted above the chest, and the victims died from severe blood loss. 3. All the victims had simple jobs and friend circles, with no non-drama or beef with anyone. They were all single except for one who only just, dated someone at a time. And the cops didn't find any evidence of sexual assault at the crime scene. 4. Blood handprints were found on the searched handbags of the victims, but no fingerprints were discovered. 5. There was no damage to the doors and windows of the house. The balcony window was found in an open position, suggesting that the perpetrator likely entered the house through that balcony. All these little details only make it looks really complicated to solve. However, there was a silver lining to this unfortunate situation. Among the officers involved in the investigation, there was a footprints expert who possessed remarkable skills. He had the ability to track down the suspect through the footprints left at the crime scene. So just to keep the story going, I'm gonna spill some more beans on how badass this detective is in the final part of this video if you are interested. On the 30th of May 1999, during the daytime of the incident, this exceptional detective organized all the residents of the entire building, regardless of their age or gender, together in a community meeting room. People were told to take off their shoes and walk a few steps with only socks on. So they were asked to put their feet in the ink before walking on white paper to leave their footprints. The idea was to compare these footprints to the ones found at the crime scene to find out who was responsible for the crime, right? However, surprisingly, none of those dozens of collective footprints matched the footprints discovered at the crime scene. So was this seasoned footprint expert make a mistake in his judgment? Or was the suspect not a resident of this building at all? But this expert was super sure of himself. He asked his colleagues if everyone living in this building had given their footprint. Have you make sure of it? And he wasn't just being cocky. He had his theories. Remember how I said there were blood footprints outside the apartment between the ground and the second floors? Well, most people might not have been able to tell what was going on, but this expert could tell straight away that these footprints were left with socks only. So if someone showed up at the apartment at 3 a.m. wearing only socks and knew his own way around this whole place, it's pretty unlikely that he was a total stranger. Only people who lived in the building or nearby were familiar enough with the layout to sneak into a stranger's home in the middle of the night without shoes. As expected, the police officers discovered that there was indeed one person missing from the footprints collection. You still remember this administrator I mentioned earlier who made the initial report to the police. Her husband had not participated in this footprints collection. Furthermore, when we go back to the records of the police interviews with the neighbors, her husband was the only one who claimed to have slept soundly on the night of the incident, hearing nothing at all. Right after he was asked by the police, he quickly left without even notifying his wife to his father-in-law's place with his children or kid. So her husband was pretty much a dead ranger for the police suspect. Same height, same age. His name was Zhao Lianrong. He was 37 and 172 centimeters tall, worked in Beijing, and didn't have any run-ins with the law before. People said he was a stand-up guy, a great husband and dad, all that jazz. And let's be real, someone who does something that messed up has got to have a rap sheet, right? Like it only makes sense that they'd have a history of bad behavior rather than being a neighborhood sweetheart. Well, that's why the evidence is essential. Consequently, they went to the administrator's father's house and found Zhao Lianrong collecting his footprints. They thought this time it could be this one. But when they compared the footprints, they were not exactly the same. As you can see from this picture, the left-hand side was taken from the crime scene and the right-hand side was Zhao Lianrong's right footprint. There was an issue with Zhao Lianrong's inked footprints. His big toe and middle toe was too close that his index toe was barely visible, whereas the blood footprints found at the crime scene clearly showed the indexed. However, the issue was with his right foot only. On the other foot, Zhao Lianrong's left footprints looked very similar to the footprints found at the crime scene and could be identified as coming from the same person. So, what happened? Was there someone else involved in the crime there? Did Zhao Lianrong and this unknown person both commit the crime in the same flat, with one leaving right footprints and the other leaving the left footprints? The more they thought about it, the less likely it seemed. This is where the footprint expert's expertise came into play. He pointed out that they only got Zhao Lianrong's stationary footprints, while the footprints at the crime scene were left by the suspect while moving fast, which could explain the differences. At that time, Zhao Lianrong was not the culprit and they could request his footprints, though they couldn't force him to leave footprints in a specific position. So the police had to find a right footprint left by the suspect while standing or walking at the crime scene. The police found many bloody footprints at the crime scene. They found them inside the apartment and on the staircase and hallway. It's hard for them to get it from inside of that flat because there were just so many of them. All the victims and perpetrator, right? So the police focus on the footprints in the hallway and the staircase. They found 3 footprints that were pretty clear but not complete on the first round of evidence collection. There were lots of footprints in the hallway going in both directions. The footprints clearly were left by the perpetrator, who chased after the victim who was running away. The technicians used visible footprints on stairs to estimate where hidden footprints might be based on how people walk. The investigators used a substance to reveal more footprints and they were successful. The footprints that were originally incomplete were now complete. These footprints turned blue when the substance was applied. The police noticed that the second hole was not always visible in these footprints. This could be due to differences in how a person stands, runs, or jumps. So this finding proves that the expert didn't just make a snap judgment. Now that they got these solid evidence to back up their theory. Seven days after the incident, on the 6th of June, the police brought Zhao Linrong back to the station. Now they have more evidence. They found blood of the ninth person, in addition to the information about footprints mentioned before. And there were 8 people died in the crime. So you know who was gonna be the ninth. To find out if Zhao Linrong was the main suspect, the police compared his blood to that of the ninth person, of course. During the DNA matching tests, even with the footprints, they had enough evidence to ask him to wear socks and simulate the crime scene. As Zhao Linrong took off his shoes and socks in front of everyone, the investigators saw that his right second toe was noticeably longer and arched over his big toe and third toe when he stood. Although these details might seem insignificant, what truly mattered was that the police asked Zhao Linrong to walk on white paper while wearing socks covered in ink, and the paper was placed on the staircase. So Zhao Linrong was like trying to walk in a new way when he tried to go up or down stairs. It's because he just couldn't shift his weight around in his feet. Therefore, this experiment once again confirmed that Zhao Linrong was indeed the person who left the blood footprints at the crime scene. Combined with undeniable DNA evidence, Zhao Linrong had no choice but to confess. On the night of the crime, Zhao Linrong's wife was on duty, and he just couldn't fall asleep. He was feeling super anxious and restless, checking the clock every few minutes, but time seemed to be moving slower than itself. Finally, at 3 o'clock in the morning, he gave up on trying to sleep and decided to take a walk instead. He walked over to his balcony, opened the window to get some fresh air, and noticed that the neighbor's window was also open. The balconies of their 2 apartments were so close that it only took a step to jump from one to the other. But you're probably wondering why Zhao Linrong wanted to jump over to the neighbor's balcony in the middle of the night, as it's really not too normal I thought it was. Well, part of the reason was that the balcony was having a lot of clothes hanging and swinging in the wind, and he said they smelling like laundry detergent. And according to him, he had a bit of a thing for those clothes. He said he really wanted to bury his face in them and just hug them tight. But that's not all. You see, Zhao Linrong also had a bit of a bias against the girls who lived in that apartment. He just assumed they were all tall, beautiful, and worked late, and they all wore high heels. Who wears high heels at night unless they're up to no good, right? In his mind. Anyone who worked late and wore high heels couldn't possibly have a legitimate job. Plus, his wife had told him that they were in this jewelry business, and that really got his attention. To Zhao Linrong, selling jewelry meant they had money, and if they had money, they might have some really valuable stuff hidden away in their apartment. So he figured he'd just sneak in there in the dead of night and take what he wanted without anyone knowing. That's pretty much why he decided to go through with his plan. So apparently, Zhao Linrong always slept in socks, and he was wearing them at this time as well. He had left his shoes in the living room, and he didn't want to risk waking his kid by going to get them. So he decided to go barefoot. He also wanted to make sure he didn't leave any fingerprints, so he found some gloves just like a thief in the movies. After he found the perfect pair, he realized that he might need something to defend himself if he ever ran into anyone. So he went back inside his own flat again to grab a folding knife. Now he felt prepared and ready to climb over to the neighboring apartment. And you know the next. A burglary went horribly wrong. So Zhao Lianrong left his apartment and went down to the corner of the staircase. Then he carefully left the victim's slippers that he had worn earlier on the stairs. After wiping the blood off his feet, he slipped back along the edge of the staircase to the second floor and returned to his own home. Zhao Lianrong removed the clothes he had worn during the crime, cleaned them, and then cut the gloves into pieces before flushing them down the toilet. Later, he took the opportunity to dispose the folding knife by throwing it into a disused well. He thought everything should be foolproof, right? Although he had slipped and grazed himself while chasing the escaping woman, he believed that no one would notice that tiny bit of blood stain that even him couldn't find on his way to flee. But he felt somewhat uneasy and couldn't sleep all night. As expected, the police came to question him during the day. Fortunately, since he had trouble sleeping anyway, he took the opportunity to self-induce drowsiness, claiming that the weather that night was just too comfortable and he slept like a log. After all, no one could verify whether he had really slept through the night or not. So on the 18th of June 1999, the Beijing Procuratorate First Bench decided to sue the defendant Zhao Lianrong for the crime of intentional homicide at the Beijing First Intermediate People's Court. And guess what? The court found the defendant guilty of the crime of intentional homicide and sentenced him to death with deprivation of political rights for life. The case ends here. And I said I'd elaborate a bit on this footprint expert. The expert is Wang Jun. He is like one of the OGs in the Chinese law enforcement when it comes to forensic footprint identification. He even wrote the first ever textbook on the subject in China. Back in the late 60s, there was this dude named Ma Yulin. He didn't go to school to learn how to do it though. He became a total pro at identifying people's age, height, and physique based on their footprints. He showed off his skills in Beijing once and got everyone hyped, especially our guy, Wang Jun. Wang Jun was a young forensic technician at the time and thought, if I could learn that, we're all sorted. So Wang Jun bought a train ticket and went to Inner Mongolia to learn from Ma Yulin. He stayed there for 8 months, sharing meals, accommodations, and field works with Ma Yulin. Finally, he mastered this invaluable skill. And for his tutor, Ma Yulin was just a kid when he started to herding sheep and would get whooped whenever the sheep went missing. But over time, he got good at tracking down the little troublemakers by following their crazy hoof prints. He even got so good that he could tell how old and tall the sheep thieves were just by looking at their footprints. Impressive, huh? Anyway, after China became the People's Republic, the police in Inner Mongolia hired Ma Yulin as a forensic technician. At that time, not yet fully established as a master, Wang Jun returned to Beijing with his early achievements and decided to put his skills to the test. And he actually kept succeeding over and over again. In the rape case, he totally nailed it by using footprints analysis to identify the suspect. It was the first time anyone had ever done that, and other investigators were seriously impressed. They took his suggested profile and set up a jacknet, and boom, the suspect walked right into it. Wearing different shoes that were not similar to the crime scene though. Wang Jun was like, but that's him for sure. And the suspect, of course, didn't know the police wasn't 100% sure, so he quickly confessed to the crime. Then in Beijing, there was this other case where some silver ingots got stolen, and Wang Jun was on it. Based on the footprints at the scene, he figured out that the suspect was a cart driver. Because think about it, cart drivers always walk alongside the cart, so they subconsciously divided their footsteps. The case was solved, and everyone was totally amazed by Wang Jun's incredible abilities. So this guy was pretty good at solving cases. Like, really good. And after so many years, he got famous for being an expert in identifying footprints for law enforcement. Then he wrote a book that explained all the science behind footprints and how he got so good at it, like we said. That's why in today's case, he was so confident about everything on the footprints. And thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's case. If you do, please like and subscribe. I will see you in my next video.